Welcome, one and all. I am Jack Brewer with Expanding Frontiers Research, and this is the Wayward Sons Book Group, where we read and discuss my nonfiction book, Wayward Sons, NICAP and the IC. The book is an exploration of the overlap between a mid 20th century UFO organization, the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, and the U.S. intelligence community. For tonight's reading and discussion, I'm joined by EFR Executive Director Erica Lukes. Rachel is here, who does some research and blogging and YouTube work. Jeff Knox, Sharon Brown, Randy, Allison. And before we get started, I'm going to kind of just go around and ask if you would each please give a bit of introduction to let folks know who we're talking with and what you do or what your interests are. How about you, Erica?
Okay, I am Jack's research partner. I've known Jack for quite a few years. I am involved with Expanding Frontiers Research.org. You can go check us out. And I am absolutely, I love my partnership with Jack. We've done many great things, and I'm very proud of our work. I have a show called UFO Classified, and I've been doing that for a while, and I'm a fitness instructor. So
Thank
that's my
you.
story. Yeah.
Thank you. Who's next?
Hi, I'm Rachel Nelson. I work in a convenience store. In my free time, I'm a crank, although I don't actually make any money off of it. Um, I collaborate sometimes with Jeff Knox. We work on a notion sometimes known as UFO Sunset, which, in deep time, like if you consider it in deep time, we pretty our content is pretty frequent, but on the scale of human time, it's less reliable. I also write poetry.
Hmm.
Oh,
Sharon?
I would I would start with I'm a poet. That's the most impressive. Um, Hi, I'm Sharon Brown. Jack and I know each other through a book group that I have where we read and discuss American and international political history, trying to make sense of what's happening now politically in the US, what came before, and what we can learn from history to understand the present.
Thank you.
I guess I'll go. I'm Jeff Knox. I'm a UFO historian and researcher. I work on this topic full time. I publish cases under every day, which I call Today in UFO History, where I feature cases that happened on today's date throughout the course of the history of this topic. And as Rachel pointed out, I also contribute with her on a YouTube channel called UFO Sunset, where I've given lectures on various cases, and we've talked about various cases on the topic of UFOs.
Thank you. Allison?
Hi, I'm Allison. I am a paralegal. Research is my forte, and I am part of Sharon's book group, and that's how I got to know Jack, and I'm interested in definitely interested in lots of different things and the intelligence community and things like that. So
Yes, thank you. I hit up Allison and Sharon sometimes about their ideas for how to do certain things online and conduct meetings and things like that. I appreciate their mentorship with it. And I met Randy because I was attracted to a blog post he wrote at his blog a while back that was insightful and interesting. And tell us some about yourself, please, Randy.
Yeah, so I'm a software developer, and I've been interested in UFOs ever since I was a kid, and I first heard about the topic. I think it was in second or third grade when I first heard about UFOs, and I was kind of hooked from that point. And I was a true believer for many decades, and then eventually through just reading a variety of books and on different topics, and Jack's book, The Grays Have Been Framed, I kind of broke out of that true believer mindset, and I've since then I've just been discovering there's a whole world of UFO history that I was never aware of, and so I'm just kind of here to learn more about all the stuff I never knew before.
Thank you. Thank you. That's great. Thank you all for your introduction. And if you're listening on YouTube or at another website, you too can join us, and just hit me up at jackbrewerblog@yahoo.com. The email address will be in the video description in order to request Zoom invitations to the weekly meetings. I also will provide you with a free PDF of the book, Wayward Sons, NICAP, and the IC, if you take interest in this and would like to participate with us and discuss it. What we usually do is read some and then discuss. People will volunteer to read. We are starting on chapter 5. If any of you guys that are here don't have your book tonight or anything like that, that's okay. No one ever has to read, but you're encouraged to. But for instance, if Sharon is driving across town, we do not require her to read as she is out doing her errands. Would anyone like to start for us on chapter 5?
The above image is from an early NICAP prospectus. The inflation increase from 1957 to 2021 is over 9.5 times. $15 equals $143.70. $1,000 is currently $9,579.89. Early on, there were suspicions among NICAP organizers about the motives of Townsend Brown and his associates. NICAP files include a series of handwritten notes. The notes are not signed by their author, but the 3 pages after, the 3 pages offer apparent insights into circumstances surrounding what seems to be a 1956 meeting. Below is one of the pages. The above page suggests Townsend Brown spoke only vaguely about finances. It is also suggested Morris K. Jessup was not monetarily involved with NICAP. There is reference to Mrs. Rose Hackett, the office manager. She was one of 4 who made founder membership donations of $1,000 during the first year of operations, according to a 1959 report to the Board of Governors, authored by Major Donald Kehoe. Mrs. Hackett was a widow and was soon to marry D. Cameron Campbell, who briefly worked for NICAP as a treasurer. The curious presence of another man is noted, described as an ex-FBI man who in government work had foundation work. His name is not documented. It is noted Miss Clara John had nothing to do with NICAP and that Kehoe warned Brown about her. I confidently suspect such warnings pertain to Mrs. John's liberal views of UFOs, contactees, and esoteric subject matter, as compared to those of Kehoe, who considered himself more UFO conservative. Rent is listed as $300 per month with an option for the rest of the building. Calculating for inflation, that's over $2,800 a month by standards as of this writing. Perhaps they either expected saucer hunting to be more lucrative than it turned out, or they initially had wealthier underwriters than most UFO researchers who followed in their footsteps.
Thank
Or
you,
both.
Allison.
Mhm.
Let's pause there for a minute and consider some of that. It just seemed odd to me that they clearly expected to have a lot of money, you know, and they extended themselves a lot. They owed a lot of money for the office space and whatnot. And I just don't want to skip too quickly over that line about a former FBI man that did foundation work, because I'm wondering if that's a reference to Carvalho or perhaps Roquefort, who lied about where they worked. You know, like that's the only reference I'm aware of that directly says an FBI man, where we can see on their CVs and their FBI profiles, the ones that we've gotten, that some of them, like DeRoquefort, was involved with some foundations, but not the FBI, at least not overtly. That would just be an odd thing to say in a meeting of a saucer club. Any thoughts or insights on that from any of you guys?
Well, in my head canon, it's definitely a cigarette smoking man. That's all I got. Sorry.
And so, yeah, it is. It's and what's with, we're not gonna jot his name down. Just the FBI guy in the trench coat that's outside smoking. Like, what's up with that?
Yeah, it's really bizarre, and I feel like it's a lot of these people showing up. They like a lot of like Clara John, Rose Hackett. They show up really quickly, and you don't really. There's not really much of an indication of why they're there.
Yeah, like what we essentially have here is, and it's going to become increasingly apparent as we proceed through the next couple of chapters, is that Morris Jessup and Townsend Brown were looking for people to start a group, and Townsend Brown was involved with intelligence assets and went to Clara John's farm looking for somebody that had a UFO newsletter and already had a group assembled, is my read of the situation. In fact, now would be a good time. We spoke a little about some things last week that I gave more thought since we met last. One was, it's kind of ironic, isn't it, that people that the FBI were interviewing for Nicholas Roquefort's security clearance, Nicholas de Roquefort's security clearance, would warn them that he may have had some Nazi sympathies and it's a little dodgy what side of the war he was on when the Germans were occupying France. And that was generally considered water under the bridge because things get tough when your country is being occupied. But the more I thought about that, the more I thought about the FBI was intimately aware that Nazi scientists and technicians and engineers were being recruited for Operation Paperclip, which is just ironic that American citizens were warning them, this guy you're asking us about, he might be a little on the fascist side. So I kind of gave that some thought that there's that big disconnect that the American public like had no idea what the intelligence agencies were even looking for in a character witness. Like obviously he passed with flying colors because that would be a minimal concern, obviously. Another thing that I think bears mention, especially in light of this note that somebody's saying an FBI man is here, that we don't know who that is or who even may have misrepresented themselves as an FBI man. It was this very year, 1956, that historians say the FBI began counterintelligence project that was known as COINTELPRO, and it ran into the late 60s, early 70s, where they infiltrated groups and undermined them and spied on them and created chaos. I just think deserves mention too that, you know, we've talked a little about Project Bluebird and Operation Artichoke and all that, you know, the MK Ultra was getting going with the CIA. And by now it's hit its stride with Alan Dulles' CIA and in Europe and throughout the United States. And is it just me, or you just like don't hear that context when people talk about UFOs and history? Any thoughts or comments on any of that? Anybody?
I don't hear that context. I think it's an important one. I don't hear that. So
Yeah,
I think you're right.
While we're laughing, and you know, rightfully so, that these intelligence assets are like being cleared for work with the State Department, while they're conducting coups in Guatemala and Iran during this very point in history. We laugh that, and then he said, I think I'll head over to the NICAP headquarters and, you know, help out with the UFO investigation. It is amusing to some extent, but I think, yeah, it does bear mention that this is the COINTELPRO, MK Ultra, Operation Paperclip bullseye. You know, like we're not even talking about a couple years before or after. It's like their prime time.
Well, I
Well,
think
go ahead.
I think it's like you point out, you know, elsewhere in the book multiple times, a lot of people, when they're looking at UFOs and the UFO history and the topic, their focus is narrowly on UFOs, alien spaceships, lights in the sky. Like it's not really about the context of the situation or the people involved and what and why they might be involved. Like they've got blinders on and are narrowly focused on strictly the lights in the sky kind of aspect of the topic.
and it's understandable. It really is that when we're doing sales work and we're doing retail work and we're working in the health industry and the legal profession and raising kids, we're not studying the clandestine services and how they operate, you know? And if we happen to see something in the sky that's odd, we start studying UFOs, not the FBI. Please go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting because it seems like a lot of the people who are involved and the reasons why they're motivated are for um, social reasons, like so for psychological operations kind of thing. And a lot of people at that time, and I mean even still today, they don't really understand like what that means. And so like there's this kind of thing that's going on, I think a lot of the time where it's like they can be very transparent because they understand what they're saying in a very different context from like what the public is saying. So like Richard Doty, for example, because he just makes up so much BS, he can kind of say whatever he wants to, mix in whatever true statements he wants to. But in this context, it's kind of like, hey, we're just making a public UFO organization, to study UFOs, and like, I mean. I'm not putting my thoughts very well, but like there on a certain level, like uh, I think a lot of these people they can just say, oh well, we're involved in public relations or that kind of thing, and that's a true statement, but the full implications of it are not obvious.
You're wording your thoughts fine, and thanks for trying to articulate. I often like am trying to get a thought out. I'm kind of trying to figure out how to get there. And with some of this stuff, I don't even really know what the thought is sometimes. It's like hard to keep it all in your head at the same time that you've got these people that are doing these strange things with these people that seem to be on the level about their interest in UFOs. And then you try to keep it in context with three or four other things going on. Yeah, it gets complex. It does. Who else would like to share? Go ahead, Sharon.
Allison and I were talking about a completely different topic today, but it sort of applies here that when there's something that captures something that people want to be true, right? That they would that it's go off of instinct that you would like to be true, then it narrows. They rule out context on the wider level because that wanting something to be true and in your favor seems to take over our brains. And then the wider context, like Jeff is talking about, is not considered to balance out what they want to be true.
Yeah.
Versus just taking things as an observation or piece of data.
Yeah. Randy, please go ahead.
Yeah, kind of echoing what Sharon just. Okay, I thought I was going to lose power for a minute, but I think I'm still here. um, and 100% agree with what Jeff just said a minute ago about the blinders on. Like, when I was a true believer, I just wanted to know where the aliens were and like what were they telling people, and that was, ignored everything else. And to to your point about the Operation Paperclip, I don't know enough. I don't know that much about it, but just I was wondering how well known was it at the time? If it was, pretty secretive, then you know, even some of the FBI people investigating Roquefort might not have known about that. Um, I think that was all I had to say.
I think you're absolutely right. I have read Annie Jacobson's book, Operation Paperclip, which I recommend. I don't think the public knew anything at all about it at the time. I think that the ones that the Nazis that clearly had German accents that were working at NASA, I think they were framed as like prisoners of war and people that were with the Allies, I think is how it was framed. I think many of them, if I recall Jacobson's book correctly, many of them were given identities and backgrounds and histories. And I don't think it was known for a long time, the extent of it. I think it's probably still not totally.
As good. So the full extent may have not been known, but news reports in 1946 were already coming out about Nazis that they'd brought over. Like the El Paso Herald had a thing about one of the Nazis not liking the chicken. They called it rubberized chicken that the army was feeding them. And so this kind of drew outrage from everyone from like Eleanor Roosevelt, Einstein, Rabin, Stevie Rise, and the American Jewish Congress. So like there was news coming out kind of at the time, but again, like I said, I don't think it was widely known or it was like a big story.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah. Like how we found too that we can find articles that identify Joseph Bryan as a CIA asset and a CIA officer, but it's hard to like. It's like it wasn't like on Twitter. It was just in the Washington Post once, and if you didn't read the Washington Post and you lived in Texas, you wouldn't have any idea. But it is relevant too. Thank you for pointing that out, Jeff, that it's hard to keep a big deal secret. It really is. People talk to each other. Yeah. Rachel.
Sorry, this is kind of a tangent, but it was something I was thinking about from previously when I brought up Fugo balloons. There's something that I drew from Ross Cohen's book a lot that, because his book is a little bit older and it doesn't incorporate like some of the main conceits of Jeffrey Kay's articles, is that there was basically the press wasn't allowed to publish stories about the balloons for a lot of the time that they were actually happening, which later, of course, like became a big controversy because five people actually like died in Oregon because of one of these balloons. But but the thing is, though, is that a lot of people did know about the balloons, just that they weren't appearing in the press. And Cohen is pretty clear about that and kind of documents some of that. So like people in the military, people in like public organizations and stuff like that would have been informed about the balloons via word of mouth, basically, and that kind of thing. Which is why I was saying, that Kehoe and Hillenkoetter probably uh, knew about the balloons when they were happening is because they were both serving in the Navy at the time. And then Hillenkoetter, of course, like being so incredibly involved in intelligence likely knew more about like, you know, like maybe the germ warfare stuff and stuff like that.
Thank you. Jeff, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say my grandma, you know, being from Oregon, actually said that at the time, because the Fugo balloon stories couldn't be in the press, they actually came around to church services and community gatherings to warn people about the balloons and give them information about it. And that's how she actually heard about it, was at a church event back in, you know, the 40s.
Wow.
And that's how they would get the information out without putting it in the mainstream press, you know, because you don't want everyone to know about it, but you have to let people know, like on the coastal towns. She lived on a coastal town in Oregon, that, you know, these could be coming your way, so don't go near them, you know, stay away.
Wow. Well, let's take it up at, I think, aren't we at please take particular note?
Please take particular note of the line indicating a public relations firm in Baltimore assisted Brown. Similar was suggested in a letter from Arnold Krugman to Kansas Representative Wint Smith. After Brown and two associates formally filed for NICAP Incorporation in August 1956, Krugman wrote to Representative Smith in September. The committee has just been incorporated and it has employed a fund gathering organization which will operate in all parts of the United States. I understand the fund gathering organization has made a preliminary investigation for its own business purposes and has come to the conclusion that it will be able to undertake this operation successfully. If I recall my facts correctly, it expects to raise its funds from some 500,000 persons. In addition, there are tens of thousands in local clubs or organizations in every part of the United States devoted to sightings and other forms of studies and recordings connected with aerial phenomena and flying saucers. It indeed appears likely Nicholas de Roquefort and Bernard J.O. Carvalho acted as consultants with fundraising organizations or public relation firms, as Barry Greenwood suggested by email. Perhaps the two were even presented as part of the Baltimore firm. You will recall Roquefort's employment history as an influential lobbyist and propagandist, and Carvalho's apparent assistance promoting Mayor Baba and his book.
Thank you, Allison. I don't want to wear you out reading. If anyone else would like to read, or any comments at this point?
It sure sounds like that expectations of 500,000 people was wildly off.
It was, and even so, you can see where a lot of people could have had a lot of interest in the topic and the group. That, I mean, they were expecting a lot to happen out of this, or claiming they were expecting it. Yeah, Allison.
Do we know if it was normal at the time for a group like NICAP, who had just become incorporated, to hire a fund gathering organization, or was that like a normal thing that was done?
I think that was rather novel. Erica, Jeff, really our only sample is like APRO at that time, right?
I think most organizations clearly didn't have the kind of money that somehow NICAP was coming up with to pay an organization to do stuff like that. I mean, as we've seen, NICAP was spending obscene amounts of money that, quite frankly, I'm not even sure where they got it from, even with those $1,000 founders donations.
Right, right.
I could see like, 500,000 people like being interested in the topic and like joining if it was free, but to pay whatever that was at the time, $45, $50, it seems, I don't know, seems kind of optimistic and clearly was.
And we've talked about before, people that were watching them were suspicious when they claimed it was not a government agency. Like, number one, it was in the Capitol. Number two, it had a name like a government agency as compared to APRO or something like that, other agencies, Midwest UFO organization, things like that. And it ran like one. It had a board, and it had a committee that was going to oversee subcommittees. And Richard Hall gets credited with some of that design, but it's also there from the outset, like in the prospectus. And I've mentioned to you guys, I had suspicions that Carvalho and Thomas O'Keefe and Mary Von King were who actually designed the setup, along with for their client being Townsend Brown. But yeah, I think a lot of people just didn't even believe them when they said it was not a government agency. And we're just about to get into one of them too.
Yeah, the only thing I was able to find on that Carvalho guy, besides for the Mayor Bobair thing that, like you mentioned, was about his home news service that he was director of, like in 57 or 58 or something like that. Like, that's the only mention in all the newspaper archives I could find about this guy, like, at all.
Yeah, I seriously doubt it was his name, to be honest. I doubt, and in fact, I've had people not familiar with the UFO topic joke around with me and go, Tom Dooley, Roscoe Hillencoder, just stop it. These weren't even these guys' names. But seriously, when you can't find them anywhere else, yeah, you tend to wonder, like Dr. Green and MK Ultra is everywhere. So clearly, 30 different assets were using the name Dr. Green. Who'd like to read next, please?
Further documented in the above handwritten note was Major Kehoe's doubts about proposed financial strategies. As a matter of fact, the line immediately following mention of the public relations firm states, quote, Kehoe very wary about whole thing, Brown and money angle specifically. The handwritten page goes on to reference UFO writer and researcher Ivan Sanderson. He and his associates apparently and understandably took interest in the buzz generated by NICAP. One such associate was Robert Serling, older brother of famed Twilight Zone creator Rod Serling. Robert Serling was an avid writer, credited with at least 8 novels and 16 nonfiction books. During World War II, he served in the Army Air Force and subsequently had a particular interest in covering aviation. Robert joined United Press International after the war and became its aviation editor in 1960. A few years before that, Robert apparently composed a memo to Ivan Sanderson about NICAP. He described general operations and a visit he made to NICAP headquarters, almost certainly in 1956. They say vigorously it is an independent organization with no connection with the government, Robert Serling wrote to Sanderson. His memo goes on to briefly describe the activities of Townsend Brown and Morris Jessup, the latter of which was observed to be connected with the outfit in some capacity. Their personal positions on flying saucers were noted. Brown considered himself a shade right of center, Jessup to the left. Robert Serling's memo concludes with the following description of events during his visit. Quote, "A rather distinguished-looking woman pleasantly asked me if she could help me. Her face froze about 40 degrees. When I said I was a reporter, she stiffly asked for identification. Brown, Jessup, and Frozen-Face were the only three in the office at the time. Brown made a call to someone and asked if someone would like to speak to him, but someone said no." Unquote.
Thank you. Any thoughts on that? Or like, see, that's an instance of Robert Serling writing Ivan Sanderson, who shows up in a lot of other FBI documents and was British intelligence, that he's obviously scouting NICAP and trying to figure out what's going on, and has a tone of suspicion that, like, they're disturbed I'm a reporter. I don't, they claim they're not the government, but you can kind of read between the lines there that he's not sure what's going on there. And I just thought it was kind of interesting that he was Rod Serling's brother, you know.
Um, yeah, also, yeah, I thought it was interesting that that he said that like they vigorously said it is an independent organization with no connection. It's like that's like it's like they don't know what they're doing or something. Like, they're just like, oh, we're definitely not connected to the government.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And to, like, say vigorously would mean he asked more than casually, like he pressed him on it, you know. So you kind of wonder why. And I think we kind of know why, you know, because it didn't look like, and like if it doesn't look like it to us 70 years later, I'd imagine the View standing there in the office had a lot more insight to it than we have now.
Oh, that's right. Rod Serling hosted that documentary from the 70s, the Robert Ebeneger one or whatever. What is it
Oh,
called? You know what
yeah.
I think people here probably know. You know what I'm talking about, Jeff?
Yeah, UFOs, it has begun, also
Yeah,
known
yeah.
as UFOs past, present, and future, I think. Yeah.
Any volunteers to read?
I will, if you want.
Thank you.
All right. An early NICAP personnel list taken from a Board of Governors progress report dated January 7th, 1957. Note D. Cameron Campbell, treasurer, and the notion indicating he soon married Mrs. Rose Hackett. Campbell took over as treasurer from Thomas O'Keefe. The two treasurers play curious, although brief roles in our developing story. Also, please notice the presence on the list of Bernard J.O. Carvalho. He was listed as a major in the Air Force, a circumstance I considered to increase the likelihood he was the same Bernard Carvalho who, a few months earlier, flew the Meher Baba entourage with NBC cameramen in tow through a storm in New York to a spiritual center dedication in South Carolina. Carvalho was designated as NICAP Special Advisor, whose responsibilities include producing a magazine. The Army Times Publishing Company was apparently a prospect for a publisher, as indicated below in the same January progress report. Further evidence in December 7th, 1956, NICAP Progress Report of Carvalho's position as chairman of the membership committee. An example of Carvalho's activities in his capacity as chairman of the membership subcommittee included signing a form letter for prospective members. The letter stated NICAP was chartered to implement and direct a united scientific investigation of aerial phenomena. The January 7th, 1957 Board of Governors Progress Report also referenced Nicolas de Rochefort. A sample of Rochefort's activities with NICAP. Was the fundraising firm consulted under Brown's direction actually serving as cover for Rochefort, Carvalho, and the CIA? As my research continued, it seemed to be an increasing possibility. Let's take it from the top. In late August 1956, Brown and two of his associates filed a certificate of incorporation for NICAP. You will recall, as documented in the previous chapter, the FBI launched investigations of Rochefort the same month, August 1956. The trio of T. Townsend Brown, Mary V. King, and Thomas D. O'Keefe completed the document on August 28th. The next day, it was submitted to the applicable agency. From a copy of the Certificate of Incorporation, Nonprofit National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomenon. Further documentation of the incorporators. A two-page contract dated August 29th, 1956 was drawn up between NICAP and Counsel Services Incorporated, which was located in Baltimore. This is almost certainly the previously referenced Baltimore firm. The contract states, Counsel Services will direct initial organization plans and the general public relations and membership enlistment program for NICAP. The document goes on to describe plans pertaining to membership recruitment and a sustained public information program. The importance of making a positive initial impression on the public was emphasized, and Counsel Services stressed its need to handle the task, which it warned should not be left to amateurs. The contract was undertaken on behalf of Counsel Services by Mary Vaughan King, president, who collaborated on the NICAP Certificate of Incorporations 24 hours earlier. Counsel Services was to be paid $1,500 per month beginning October 1st and for 3 months, with the fee increasing to $1,850 each month for the next 12 months, starting in January 1957. Those figures would be multiplied over 9 times to factor inflation as of this writing. The contract stipulated additional consultants in related fields for regional directors may be retained as necessary to keep pace with expanding operations, subject to the approval of the committee's officers, all to work under the supervision of the senior officers of this firm, namely, Mr. Thomas D. O'Keefe and Mary V. King, Mrs. Cost of consultants and all related expenses were to be paid by NICAP. It is reasonable to suspect that such consultants included Rochefort and Carvalho. A copy of the contract accepted by Brown, pending approval by the board.
Thanks. Let's pause there a minute, please, Jeff. Yeah, it was just an insane amount of money that they were committing. And we can see some of the key things in that contract to me were that Thomas O'Keefe and Mary Vaughan King were empowered to bring on more personnel. And as Barry Greenwood and other people have aptly observed, Carvalho and de Rochefort had no interest in UFOs. We can't document that anywhere. And de Rochefort's background was incredibly spooky, for lack of a better term. I mean, almost certainly. And as we go through this, it will become, increasingly apparent who Thomas O'Keefe was and other aspects of it. Any thoughts or comments, anyone?
Yeah, just again, the amount of money, like you said, is insane that they're paying, and the amount of power that Counsel Services basically had, where they were effectively running NICAP. NICAP was Counsel Services. They had the power to hire more people, and which NICAP would then have to pay for. I mean, if there was no government connection, I would say this was just all a financial scam and a grift to pay money to all your friends. But given the government connection and Counsel Services people, you have to wonder.
I think that's a really key point that I'd invite folks to keep in mind is that Counsel Services connection. as we continue through it. If you'd continue reading, please, Jeff.
The NICAP Certificate of Incorporation was formally approved October 24th, 1956. Organizers of the young group then held a meeting in early November to appoint acting officers and personnel. Most seemed expected to retain their positions at least until the first annual meeting in January. Staff would then become solidified, and meetings of the Board of Governors and membership were envisioned to take place annually thereafter. A November 6, 1956 letter attributed to NICAP Secretary John Kendrick advised Admiral Delmar Farney of the evolving situation, sort of. Admiral Farney would become the inaugural NICAP chairman of the board. The letter mentioned some personnel appointments, as well as changes already taken place, but was not entirely clear about circumstances surrounding Mary Von King. Neither did it specifically mention the proposed counsel services contract, but did advise the Admiral that NICAP was pursuing professional fundraising organizations, and the board would be polled when recommendations were reached. On a semi-interesting aside, it could be argued the letter was not written by John Kendrick, as compared to perhaps composed for his approval. I suggest this because there is mention within the second paragraph of Kendrick by name, which would indicate if he wrote the letter, he oddly chose not to refer to himself in first person. An apparent draft of the letter was located in a separate NICAP file. The draft carries what might be considered some interesting differences from the letter eventually sent to Admiral Farney. For instance, the draft initially suggested Incorporated and Counsel Services Senior Officer O'Keefe retained his position as NICAP Treasurer. Then is amended to suggest he never intended to keep the office, but only accepted it on a temporary basis. We can also observe that Mary Von King is described in the draft as relinquishing her post in order to assist in the very important work of public relations, with Kendrick taking her place. In the final letter, Farney is told Von King relinquished her position to assist in the committee management liaison work. Below are the apparent draft and final letter. It goes on for a few pages. The letter apparently sent to Farney documents it was at this point in early November 1956 that D. Cameron Campbell assumed the position of treasurer from Thomas O'Keefe. Handwritten notes apparently of the meeting from November 6, 1956 meeting. The notes indicate salary considerations, and there's a brief reference to touching base with an attorney named Borzelleri. We will explore his activities a bit more shortly. A meeting was then held on December 7th, 1956, and Rochefort was appointed to succeed Brown as executive vice chairman, effective virtually immediately. The circumstances were documented below in a progress report to the Board of Governors, composed the same day of the meeting, December 17th. This in all likelihood reflects Brown's rapid fall from favor. However, and rather interestingly, Rochefort soon brought it to the attention of the executive committee it lacked the authority to make the change. It seems to suggest Rochefort had more than a passing familiarity with the applicable NICAP regulations, or at least a better understanding of executive committee authority and limitations than others. It might also be reasonably interpreted to suggest Rochefort had reasons to oppose the removal of Brown. Personal changes was subsequently deferred, as indicated in the image below, taken from a January progress report. For whatever reason, Mr. Campbell quickly resigned as treasurer. After taking over the position from Mr. O'Keefe in November, Campbell tendered a resignation in December. Townsend Brown penned a December 18 letter to Campbell, regretfully acknowledging Campbell's desire to vacate the position. A December 28 memo from Brown to the executive committee indicates Campbell was subsequently asked to withdraw his resignation until a successor could be elected at the January meeting of the Board of Governors. Campbell apparently agreed. It was following that fateful first annual meeting of the Board of Governors that Brown and NICAP formally parted ways. Brown's letter of resignation is shown on the following page. Brown's associates, including Rochefort and Carvalho, were gone in short order as well. As suggested previously, many researchers now believe Brown and company were banished due to problems that arose with NICAP financial accounting. And this is certainly supported by the chain of personal shuffling. The respected ties to the CIA may or may not have been an issue in late 1956, but it is certainly implied by various sources. Coincidentally or otherwise, the forming of NICAP and its tumultuous beginning ran concurrently with FBI investigations of Nicholas de Rochefort, which as we explored, took place from mid-1956 to at least January 1957, and in all likelihood until he died in 1964.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I'll just finish up the last couple of paragraphs here after Townsend Brown's resignation letter. Says Major Donald Kehoe would later allude to unfulfilled promises of significant NICAP financial support. In a July 1959 director's report to the Board of Governors, Kehoe wrote that Brown resigned with NICAP in the doldrums. Kehoe indicated that NICAP was in debt at the time, but 2 donations of $5,000 each were promised, as well as an assurance of $50,000 or more to guarantee operations. It is not clear how much debt the organization accrued in its opening months. Factoring inflation, those pledges totaled over $500,000. Kehoe further stated the funding was withheld for reasons he attributed, correctly or otherwise, to ridicule and pressure. There were clearly problems and turmoil in the upstart NICAP financial department. Our story of NICAP early finances demands a deeper look at Counsel Services Incorporated. Its leadership and the circles it kept raise interesting implications, particularly considering the likelihood Rochefort and Carvalho rode in with them.
Do we have any idea who offered up $50,000 worth of guarantees to cover NICAP's bills?
In the coming pages, I implied it may have been some guys that liked the CIA, like there was a angel donor named Clendenin that donated a lot of money to Des Fitzgerald, who was a New York attorney who became a CIA deputy director. He donated a lot of money to Julius Amos, who was a colonel and a CIA officer. And Amos, as we'll see, was associated with Counsel Services. And he would give chunks of 50 grand to Amos, who like you found about Carvalho, Amos wrote a newsletter. And at least ostensibly rattled swords with the CIA. But, you know, I mean, Allison's fond of mentioning controlled opposition. You don't know how much they're, like, would they really allow an officer to be writing newsletters and making them look bad if it wasn't things they wanted to get published? I don't know. Maybe sometimes not. But I don't know, Jeff. I also kind of consider Kehoe as kind of an unreliable narrator. I'm not sure I even believe him. That like, how many years after Brown's gone that he held the position for like a week, can you keep blaming Brown for the situation that the organization's at? You know, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, it also just seems weird to me how Counsel Services, you know, was offered up a pretty well-paying contract for the time for NICAP. Why a company like that would even take on an organization unless they were sure they were going to get paid from someone. Someone was going to cover those obscenely high bills. or were they really that confident they could fundraise enough money from the general public in order to cover those extravagant expenses?
Any thoughts on that, anyone? I thought we would continue into at least part of chapter 6 because these issues run off and on pretty much for the rest of the book, but particularly the next chapter or so. So I thought maybe we could go like halfway into chapter 6. Would anybody volunteer to read, or do you have some comments? Or
Well, I can volunteer to read, but I also was just going to say one of the footnotes that you linked to, I was just scrolling through some of the PDFs, and I think there was something in there from Kehoe talking about how like NICAP would have folded if he hadn't have like worked as a volunteer for several years without a salary, something along those lines. And maybe, as you say, he's an unreliable narrator. But it also just made me wonder, like, I don't know I haven't read ahead, so I don't know what's coming in the rest of the book, but like, if this was like started by the CIA, it seemed like it wouldn't be that hard to, make sure that there was enough funds to keep things going. So I don't know.
yeah, there does seem to have been some conflict that the early board members weren't in agreement on what directions they were going and what they should do. And then there was financial instability for the life of NICAP after that. Eventually, they were even borrowing money from Richard Hall, who was supposed to be employed by them. There's documentation. It's we've talked about this too. We're not going to figure out what they were doing because they were professional intelligence officers. So we don't know why they did things they did. One of my best guesses is it was a CIA era that used nonprofit organizations to transfer funds so that places like Georgetown and Stanford and various agencies weren't getting money directly from the CIA. And I don't know of any academic literature on it, but I wonder if there is any documentation of how many nonprofit agencies just turned into shell companies that nothing ever happened at. I wonder about that too. Like they weren't all Georgetown. They weren't all the Geschecter Fund, that's like famous and ends up in front of a church committee trying to explain where its funding came from, that it was giving Georgetown and various universities for MK Ultra projects. I don't know. But again, I think all that context is relevant, from COINTELPRO to literally the NICAP storyline here is someone tore down, sabotaged NICAP, but they never blamed the FBI, who was documented as doing things like that. But, the FBI was typically the civil rights organizations and Black people. at that time. But it just behooved the UFO investigators to want to believe it was about UFO research, and that hiding the, ever elusive truth. But we can't really be sure that they sabotaged it at all. And research kind of looks like they started it. So no, I don't know what was going on. I think Rachel was on point a few weeks ago when she said, I don't know, I'm paraphrasing here, but Rachel said something to the effect of, I don't know what they were doing either, but I'm pretty sure that if a research organization is trying to operate alongside intelligence assets, you're not going to end up with clear and objective systematic research. And I think that was on point. Am I paraphrasing that about right, Rachel?
I'm not sure. I don't remember. I'm sorry.
Right. I don't know. That'd be me. There's no telling what I said. I don't know. Yeah, yeah. Well, let's go a few pages, please, into chapter 6. Any volunteers to read there?
Yeah, I'll be happy to read.
Thank you.
Chapter 6, OPC and Counsel Services. Efforts to learn more about Counsel Services and its president, Mary Von King, led to the discovery of an assertion Colonel Julius Louis Pete Amos was the client of the corporation. Colonel Amos was a career CIA officer credited with overseeing spy networks and whose lengthy service history included experience in psychological warfare. While I would not rely on any single casual report to conclude Amos was necessarily a Counsel Services client, extenuating circumstances encouraged me to look further. For instance, Amos reportedly worked with the CIA division, the Office of Policy Coordination, or OPC. You will recall the OPC was the reported assignment of future NICAP Board of Governors member and psychological warfare expert, Colonel Joseph Bryan III. I located a special collection of correspondence for Colonel Amos kept at the University of Oregon. An administrator helpfully provided PDF copies of select folders of letters I requested. 2 of the letters obtained do, in fact, strongly suggest Mary Von King had professional and ongoing relationships with Colonel Amos and his wife, Mary Veronica Grogan. Ron, as the latter was known, appears to have exchanged letters from France and Turkey in 1951 with Von King that are contained in the collection of correspondence. Grogan served in the Armed Forces Secret Intelligence, as was the case with her husband. Both Grogan and Amos were employed in the spy trade. Additional documentation obtained strongly suggests Counsel Services acted as a CIA resource. Such documentation included newspaper clippings and material obtained from the CIA archives. Further circumstances of interest were found in a 1971 letter from Townsend Brown to the NICAP director at the time, Stuart Nixon. Brown suggested in the letter he had an existing relationship with a public relations firm I confidently suspect to be Counsel Services for several years prior to their 1956 collaboration on the incorporation and initial operation of NICAP. He indicated the firm was originally retained years prior due to Brown's anti-gravity-based Project Winterhaven, for which he unsuccessfully attempted to obtain funding from the Department of Defense. We will explore the above and surrounding circumstances further in the following pages. Let's start with the Office of Policy Coordination. The OPC operated from 1948 until 1952, at which time it was merged with the Office of Special Operations, OSO. The merge created the Directorate of Plans, DDP, and was credited with the solidification of the clandestine services of the Central Intelligence Agency. According to a 1973 CIA Studies in Intelligence report, released in partially redacted form in 2006, the OPC genealogical tree had many branches, but its hardiest limb was the covert action staff of the clandestine services. Many of the developments chronicled in OPC may seem to have ceased due to the fixed termination date of the office. However, the study explains, it should be expected that clandestine services maintained continuity where the formal histories of OPC and OSO end. As a matter of fact, the clandestine services picked up the pace, the CIA document states. An intriguing aspect of the OPC was its unique features as a component of the CIA. The office was described as an anomaly in the 1976 Senator Frank Church Committee report. This was because the personnel and budget were appropriated within the CIA, but the Director of Central Intelligence, DCI, did not call the shots, at least not for its first couple of years. That was done by the office's director, who was appointed by the Secretary of State. Policy guidance and decisions on the need for specific activities came from the State Department and Department of Defense. The OPC was headed by Frank Wisner, a Mississippi native from a prominent family. He attended law school in Virginia, practiced in New York, and became an experienced intelligence officer. The growth and reach of the OPC under his command was considered exceptional. During the inception of the OPC in 1948, then DCI and future prominent NICAP board member Admiral Roscoe Hillenkotter concurred with the position of a State Department representative on matters of OPC direction. The two put forth that political warfare and additional activities conducted by the OPC should be considered tools of U.S. foreign policy and subject to direction by the State Department during peacetime. The 1973 CIA report states the National Security Council, NSC, created the OPC and gave it a loose charter to undertake the full range of covert activities incident to the conduct of secret political, psychological, and economic warfare, together with preventative direct action, paramilitary activities. The OPC organizational structure was later echoed in E. Howard Hunt's book, when he stated he served in the office, and it consisted of three sections: paramilitary operations, political and psychological warfare, and economic warfare. The NSC specified the OPC was to operate as independently of the other offices of CIA as efficiency would permit. That remained the case until late 1950, when Lieutenant General Walter Bedell Smith replaced Hillenkotter as DCI. Smith was successful in restructuring the OPC command pipeline to go through his office from the State and Defense Departments. This effectively made him Frank Wisner's boss and at the helm of the OPC. In 1952, DCI Smith expressed concerns about the objectivity and effectiveness of Air Force UFO investigations. While Smith did not seem to suspect flying saucers were of extraterrestrial origin, or even a particularly concerning threat, he wanted to know what use could be made of the UFO phenomenon in connection with U.S. psychological warfare efforts, according to the CIA. The Church Committee Intelligence Report cited above asserts that OPC evolved into a vastly different entity than initially envisioned. The report states the office achieved an institutional independence that was unimaginable at the time of inception. The numbers alone are staggering. In 1949, the OPC had a total of 302 personnel. By 1952, it had 2,812, with an additional 3,142 overseas contract personnel. The 1949 OPC budget was $4.7 million. Just 3 years later, in 1952, it was $82 million. By the time of its merge with the Office of Special Operations, OPC activities included worldwide covert missions conducted out of some 47 overseas stations. The previously cited 1973 CIA intelligence study, in its assertion the clandestine services stepped up the pace thereafter could certainly be interpreted as significant, if not outright mind-boggling. The study references a CIA-composed history of the OPC made up of 5 volumes, consisting of 722 pages, plus 3 appendices and 11 attachments. To the best of my knowledge, the 5-volume OPC history has not yet been released, although a partially redacted version of its introduction is contained in the reference 1973 CIA Studies in Intelligence.
Thank you, Randy. Let's pause there for a moment. These are the guys that did the coups, y'all. This is who was in Guatemala. This is who was in Iran. This is who was sending rebels across the mountains into Tibet to try to help them defend against China, ostensibly. But this is who did that stuff. The guy that wanted to know how UFOs could be used as a psychological warfare tool. Go ahead, Allison. Do you want to expand upon that wave?
No, it's just like, okay, it's right here. They said it. Another instance of they're talking about it and they say there's no doubt that that was part of what was going on here with their involvement with NICAP, in my opinion. I mean, it seems like whether that was all fully part of the whole thing, obviously they had some interest in NICAP for that reason.
Yeah, Hillencoder, that became the chairman of the board, former DCI, and DCI Walter Smith, they'd met. Yeah. Now's a good time, to throw in the disclaimer. It doesn't mean all UFOs are hoaxes or intelligence operations. It doesn't mean that no one ever sees anything out of the ordinary that science has yet to better understand. But it does mean that a whole lot of it probably has reasonable explanations. And I mean, the guys are on record again and again and again saying, how can we use this stuff, Thoughts? Anyone?
Yes, another case of what we were saying earlier is take it as another piece of information, even though you really want to jump to the next to a conclusion, and it's very hard to not do that.
Yeah. The topic itself challenges us not to throw everything in all or nothing thinking.
And because it would be really fun if it was like a movie script was real life. You want that to happen. So it takes some restraint to not make those leaps.
Yes. How about you, Erica? Any thoughts?
I mean, it's just fascinating just listening to this whole conversation and everything that you have done in the past weeks, all of you. But to me, I've always, and Jack and I have conversations about this all the time. This is the most important aspect of all of this. And this is, and we look at where we are in our country right now and the ways that we believe in conspiracies and the ways that we aren't, we devalue science and we're devaluing, a rational thought process. And I really feel that the UFO community was definitely a test bed for some types of these covert operations. And so, and now not so, covert, but it's just as I wish that more people would have taken this seriously. And instead of just saying, there's a UFO crackpot over there, they would have understood that there were some real goings-ons taking place, and manipulations and foreign adversaries and, all sorts of money laundering and and things. And I think the world would have been a better place if maybe people wouldn't have written off the UFO subject, as just a bunch of cranks, and would have seen it for what you have researched and put forward, Jack.
Thank you. That's gracious of you. I think that's a good point, that the skeptic side can go too far too. That like there are some people that are pretty prominent that do some pretty good work that dismiss it all, and that will frame the people that are testifying to Congress as crackpots and irrational. And I think that sometimes that's just the other side of the same coin. And I'm not suggesting that necessarily some of these reports represent unexplained craft. I'm suggesting that some of these people aren't as crazy as they're implying they are, and that they are acting in an excuse me, and that they're acting in an official capacity,
Definitely interesting to watch the goings-ons, and then look at that in comparison to what's taking place right now, because it's just a new version of the same old thing. And yeah, it's fascinating. I love this, and to me, I don't understand how anybody could not find this the most fascinating part of this topic. Until we have the absolute proof that UFOs and extraterrestrials are real, like this is the meat and bones, and it's really fascinating. I love it.
How about you, Jeff? I know you're up on a lot of this.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, the government's interest in using flying saucers for potentially for psychological warfare purposes, obviously goes way back to the very beginning. Even the Grudge Report in August 1949 says that the results should be forwarded over to military and other agencies involved with psychological warfare for their potential use. In like 1952. A guy named James Rebar, who was assistant director of the CIA Intelligence Coordination, writes a memo to the CIA Deputy Director of Intelligence, arguing how we really need to find out like what the Soviets know about flying saucers. But at that point in 1952, apparently they felt it was a little too early to use flying saucers. It says it's far too early in view of the present state of our knowledge regarding flying saucers for psychological warfare planners to start planning how the U.S. might use flying saucers against our enemies. But, who knows? That's 4 years before NICAP. So that's been 4 years to figure out how they might want to plan to use flying saucers for psychological warfare purposes.
Yeah, Jeff also on Bluesky a couple nights ago, he posted an old RAND report, Research and Development Corporation, about superstitions as psychological warfare. And I don't think we can get any further through this conversation without giving a researcher and writer named Nick Redfern a shout out, that he once wrote about that RAND report. I'm sure other researchers did too, but I think he may have been one of the first where I heard of it. And in this very report, there's claims of an intelligence officer in World War II Italy that created like a scarecrow-like figure that operated electronically and glowed and like scared people, and that they led the peasants to believe that it was associated with the Germans and the Nazis. And so this like changed their the momentum of support. It was like the enemy forces had some haunting that came with them. And one of the things Redfern wrote about was like that's like exactly what they describe in the Flatbush incident in West Virginia. Was like a very similar kind of creature as is like in this Rand report being used in World War II Italy. And yeah, there's Mark Pilkington, honorable mention for Mirage Men. That what an excellent term he coined there for it in itself, Mirage Men. Uh, good stuff there, Jeff. Thank you.
You know how in my book group, we just recently studied well-known autocrats and dictators. And in their playbook is to use propaganda, use billboards, use the movies, use all sorts of things to convey the idea that they are present everywhere.
Yep.
That you're always being watched and that they are everything in the country. Well, if you could use the thought of UFOs to think, oh, coming from the sky, then psychologically it's, oh, they know us from the sky, they're watching us from the sky.
Yes, good point. I hadn't thought about this in years. Some of y'all might can fill in more of the blanks. And it may have been in Mark Pilkington's Mirage Men, may have been had a reference to it. The United States considered using or did use a false UFO event against Gaddafi to make him paranoid and to worry whether it was the United States or whether it was, if it's not the United States, who would it be? Like either one just sounds like a horrible choice, like, yeah. Does anybody remember that some intelligence operation, I think against the Libyans, about an incoming fleet of unidentified craft? Yeah, like when he's at a time when he was worried that it might break out any day from the US. Yeah.
I don't remember that, but what it made me think of was this Norway spiral in, I think, 2009. It was, it was this Bulava missile that the Russians were experimenting with, and it was like the second stage or something like that had misfired and was spinning around and created this really amazing display that went pretty viral at the time. And it was also like on the same day that like Obama was visiting someplace. I don't remember exactly where, but I think it was near Russia maybe or something like that. And it just reminds me of that a lot, that maybe like Russia was kind of like using this as a form of um, of psychological influence, basically.
Yeah,
Um,
interesting.
and I mean, like, it's not like I, something I wanted to observe is that like some of these strategies they go to like they date and tactics and stuff like that, they date to antiquity, psychological warfare and propaganda. They have been being used for thousands of years, and like the sky lanterns. I've been having trouble trying to find actual like primary references on this, and it's something I want to research more. But like the early Kongming lanterns were used in China for warfare, but it was like according to like what a lot of sources say, but like they're like secondary sources, so it's hard to say like how accurate this is and how much of it comes from legend is that they were used, to like terrify the enemy,
Yeah, yeah,
even way back then.
right.
Yeah, I kind of just want to like ramble on about that for a while because the thing is that there was a lot of panics, throughout the period of time from 1891 is the earliest documented one, but like of, involving steerable aircraft and stuff like that, and especially, from Germany, um, like, prior to the Zeppelin raids on England, there were also airship panics like just a few years before. And I'm not saying that those uh, those panics were in some way causally connected to the raids because they weren't really, but they really showed. I think what they illustrate is the incredible power that balloons and airships and unknown aircraft from the sky have. I mean, even to this day, like with the Chinese spy balloons a few years ago.
Yeah, yeah. Like Sharon was saying, I think you're both on point there that there's something like just in the human psyche about something from the sky, you know?
And if you factor in people that might have religious beliefs where they think something may descend from the sky, then that's easily mixed in there and could be manipulated as well.
Yeah, one of my favorites, some of you will have heard this one before, was
I don't know where you're going with
a
this.
General Lansdale that he was really talented. I'll just summarize at using superstitions in East Asia. He would lead them to believe there were vampires afoot, or there were, and it was a lot easier to get troops to move on that way than trying to run them out with guns. Yeah, yeah, was his thinking. I would like to move to do one more section here. If anyone would volunteer to read, please.
I'll do it. The somewhat rogue snowballing OPC division of intelligence officers seems aptly represented by the likes of Colonel Louis Pete Amos, 1895 to 1961. While the colonel was indeed a career intelligence officer, the description often falls short of expressing deeper context. For instance, Amos was credited with serving as director of the Balkan Desk for Information, COI, Coordinator of Information, while in the Armed Forces, director of the OSS, CIA Office of Strategic Services, Near Eastern Desk, Intelligence, Deputy Director, OSS for Sabotage, Intelligence, Psychological and Guerrilla Warfare, Commanding Officer, Experimental Detachment G3, UAS, FIME, and Deputy Chief of Staff, U.S. 9th Air Force. He even married a fellow spy. Letters obtained from the University of Oregon collection shows that Amos was well connected and entrepreneurial. He often provided his contacts with money-motivated investment tips. Interestingly enough, he invented Grecian formula, a hair coloring product for men. Perhaps hanging around CIA labs had its fringe benefits. Amos outwardly had a wide range of financial interests, and his primary career objectives might be considered difficult to discern. Truth be told, perhaps he had a number of agendas at different times as situations dictated. Amos was probably best known among his peers for his outside-the-box stances on warfare and the CIA. He wrote the original essay on leaderless resistance, a strategy that does not rely on vertical, hierarchical command chains, but effectiveness through the shared vision and beliefs of an inspired population. I wouldn't think that went over real well at Langley. Amos asserted that leaders are not needed, only leading ideas. He further asserted that underground chain of command oriented cells, as typically established by the agency, were often infiltrated by enemies. He argued, in effect, all the cloak and dagger stuff had only questionable returns and got people killed. This is not to suggest, however, that Colonel Amos did not partake in theater. He most certainly did. What's more, being the professional intelligence officer he was makes it difficult to identify his intentions with much degree of confidence. Similar could be said about a lot of people in these circles. Would you like me to continue? A little more?
Sure, if you don't mind, sure.
Okay. After the colonel's purported retirement, he resided in Gibson Island, Maryland, and launched the International Services of Information Foundation, or ISI. The ISI distributed a variety of bulletins and letters to supporters. Amos wrote the publications and his wife served as editor. Annual subscriptions went for $25 a piece, and at one point the couple claimed to have 1,000 subscribers. That would have been pulling in well over 200 grand a year on that venue alone by today's value. ISI newsletters contained what was portrayed as breaking international intelligence news. Some of the stories proved credible and others did not. Amos threw more gas on the CIA fire by frequently suggesting intelligence collection did not have to be as secretive as the establishment made it. He maintained the public is more confident in intelligence services that openly report their activities and knowledge of enemies, at least to a reasonable extent. Officials scoffed, suggesting the very nature of intelligent work is grounded in secrecy. ISI newsletters caught the eye of, or at least potentially annoyed, the agency with implications of having sources in sensitive places. Amos, for instance, once reported a story he ran was obtained after it was overheard in the halls of the Kremlin from an ISI newsletter archived at the CIA.
Thank you. Thanks. We'll pause there a moment. So yeah, he was a pretty colorful guy. He was doing well with his wife. He was represented and had some kind of representation or relationship with counsel services. And I'll read for a bit from there. Further complicating the situation was the fact the CIA knew Amos was indeed well connected if he wanted to take advantage of his intelligence experience. We can only wonder how much the public rivalry between Amos and the CIA was performative. Whatever the case, the show apparently sold newsletters and garnered attention. In 1953, the Washington Post carried a lengthy 4-part series on what was then known publicly of the career of Colonel Amos and the ISI. According to the 1953 Washington Post series, which is archived on the CIA website, Amos received substantial funding from a wealthy philanthropist, Clendenin Ryan, who had an interest in national security issues. He contributed $50,000 to Amos's cause in one donation alone in 1953. Factoring inflation, that's about $490,000. We can reasonably suspect Mary Von King and Counsel Services aimed to play some part in such DC funding circles. Another beneficiary of Clendenin Ryan's financial generosity was Desmond Fitzgerald, a New York attorney turned CIA man whose story left a fascinating footprint in events surrounding NICAP organizers. Little was known publicly about Fitzgerald's role with the agency until after his untimely death in 1967 at the age of 57. He was stricken with a heart attack while playing tennis at one of his homes in Virginia. He was considered one of the half-dozen most influential men in government, in spite of the lack of public information about his specific activities at the time. Upon his death, agency leaders released statements describing Fitzgerald's dedicated service. And here is an example of the articles. Des Fitzgerald left a partnership with a New York law firm in 1951 to become a full-time CIA officer. He is yet another alumni of the Office of Policy Coordination and had substantial responsibilities in the agency, rising to the position of Deputy Director of Plans. By 1966, Fitzgerald was identified as the man in charge of international espionage operations and succeeded Richard Helms in directing clandestine operations. It should be noted that Fitzgerald's leadership role in plans put him in a position to direct the activities of many of his fellow members of the former Office of Policy Coordination. Back in 1949, before Fitzgerald left the New York law firm, he served as chairman of a reform group which sought unsuccessfully to defeat the incumbent New York City mayor's re-election bid. Fitzgerald's group was funded by Clendenin Ryan, who apparently became quite fond of the work of Colonel Amos. Fascinatingly, the title of Fitzgerald's New York reform group was the Committee of 5 Million. 4 years later, in 1953, as previously explored, the Committee of 1 Million was spearheaded by future NICAP organizer Nicholas de Roquefort. You will recall records reviewed by the FBI and documented to be on file at the State Department resulted in FBI reports indicating the psychological warfare expert and then foreign citizen was employed at the time by the U.S. government. It is curious indeed that shortly after Des Fitzgerald was recruited into the Office of Policy Coordination, and as he apparently worked his way up the CIA chain of command, Roquefort was credited with masterminding what became the most prominent group in the wealthy China lobby, which practically shared the same name as Fitzgerald's former group. In light of such circumstances, I think it is reasonable to strongly suspect writer and researcher Stanley Bachrach was correct Mr. Roquefort was affiliated with the CIA. Roquefort was quite likely acting on behalf of the agency when he proposed forming the Committee of 1 Million and its activities. 3 years after Roquefort's work in the China lobby in 1956, he was closely involved in organizing NICAP. He seems to likely have been affiliated with NICAP incorporators Mary Von King, Thomas O'Keefe, and their firm, Counsel Services. We can discern from documents reviewed thus far that Counsel Services was overtly interested in fundraising and financial management. This is obviously also the case with the CIA circles of Des Fitzgerald and Julius Amos. Is everybody with me on that? You see how these kind of crazy circumstances seem to kind of overlap there? And all with lines coming out of the OPC. So I will continue. Now we're kind of getting into what was one of the more exciting parts of it for me as a researcher. I obtained 2 letters from the University of Oregon Special Collection of Amos papers. They were written by Mary Veronica Ron Grogan, intelligence professional, ISI newsletter editor, and wife of Colonel Amos. The 2 letters contain greetings to Mary. Based on a report that Amos was a customer of Counsel Services, combined with the fact Von King and Amos each operated out of the Baltimore area, and factoring the content of the 2 letters, I strongly suspect they were written from Grogan to Von King. The letters casually describe general events experienced by Grogan and Amos over a 2-week period during a trip to Paris and Turkey in 1951. The opening line of the first letter from Grogan states, "I thought I would write you a line that has nothing to do with ISI." And I will share that with you here. Please note, as indicated in the image below of the letter, that a King annotation was added to the greeting. Moreover, the folder name containing the letter is King, thus my reason for requesting the folder from the University of Oregon in the first place. I found it intriguing the 2 letters survived all the miles and years to be archived in the collection. I also found it interesting, whatever it may or may not ultimately indicate, that in 1951, Ron Grogan sat at a typewriter in Paris, apparently explaining to Mary Von King that she would not be discussing ISI. In doing so, she effectively confirmed for me, 70 years later, that ISI may well have been a common topic of their communications and primary aspect of their relationship. It indeed appeared likely ISI was affiliated with Counsel Services, as apparently was the Townsend Brown Family Foundation and later NICAP. Further research revealed Counsel Services announced its formation in the Baltimore Evening Sun in March 1947. The advertisement highlighted Mary Von King, Leo McCormick, and L.G. Shreve. Services were offered from 219 West Monument Street, Saratoga. Documents obtained from the CIA show Amos and Grogan's International Services of Information Foundation used the same 219 West Monument Street address, as indicated by a 1953 ISI newsletter depicted below. And this is a letter that becomes relevant. Leo McCormick was credited with founding Counsel Services. He was an extremely politically and civically active insurance executive. Let's momentarily direct our attention to an office called the Economic Cooperation Administration, ECA. It was a government agency that set up headquarters on Connecticut Avenue in Washington, as would the Townsend Brown Family Foundation and NICAP. A March 1949 letter shown below from DCI Hillenkoetter to the administrator of the ECA clearly establishes the CIA obtained intelligence from the organization. What's more, Hillenkoetter advised the ECA, in order that the most complete economic intelligence information may be regularly received by this agency, it is requested that the Central Intelligence Agency be placed on the routing list for all cables, memoranda, and reports of all classifications, including top secret, which are received in the Economic Cooperation Administration. I wish to take this opportunity to thank you for the cooperation you have given in the past, Hillenkoetter added. Just 2 months later, in March 1949, the Evening Sun reported Counsel Services was operating under ECA auspices. This fascinatingly involved a mission to China, which would become Nicholas de Roquefort's area of interest. 3 members of a Baltimore firm are en route by air to China, where they will serve temporarily with the Joint Commission of Rural Reconstruction under ECA auspices, the Sun reported. They are L.G. Shreve, president of Counsel Services, Inc., and Arthur Goodfriend and Henry M. Pascal. They will be joined later by Dr. Gerald F. Winfield, director of United Services to China. According to Mrs. Mary Von King, executive vice president of the firm, the men are on special temporary assignment. The article continued. Shreve initiated the project last December when he was in China with headquarters in Canton. A veteran public relations man, he served with the Army and the China Theater during the war as information and education officer. Goodfriend, a world traveler and lecturer of New York, and Pascal of Los Angeles, who has traveled extensively in China, the Sun concluded, are affiliated with Counsel Services, especially for this assignment. And a July 1950 article, Baltimore firm assists ECA, further established collaborations between the future NICAP incorporators and the CIA asset. Specialists of Counsel Services are now under contract to the Economic Cooperation Administration in connection with work in Europe after having worked on the ECA's audiovisual education operations in China, the Sun reported. In 1956, Mary Von King acted as an incorporator for NICAP. She presented the organization with an extensive and costly marketing strategy. Given the currently available information, I propose it is a distinct possibility, if not likelihood, that whether or not the CIA effectively destroyed NICAP as later alleged, its assets in 1956 were directly involved in launching the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. And I think that we will pause there for the evening, as that's quite a bit to chew on. The way it unfolded for me from was interesting and rewarding, that it like came from FOIA requests, NICAP archives, an Oregon archive, and even a CIA archive with that letter from Hillenkoetter to the ECA. And it's complicated, and it's not. Like its fundamental level, I feel like it's like I said earlier, that if we keep all of these intelligence community activities that were going on at the time in context, I don't know exactly why they did it or what they were doing, but I do not see a scenario that NICAP was not a CIA asset. I just don't see how that's even possible.
I have a random question. Do you know where Thomas O'Keefe was from?
We're about to come up on a CV that he apparently gave NICAP. So I could scroll further through the book and find it, or search for it. I don't know if it says, but he reported as some of his work working with the State Department. What particularly interested me was he worked in Guatemala with the agency that de Roquefort was associated with trade and commission. And he also, and that was of interest because there was a coup there that General Smith was involved with, and they were proud of. Frank Wisner of the OPC was credited with. And he also, one of the last things he did before he was assigned on that contract with Mary Von King, like this even just gets silly, is he listed on his resume that he served on a panel to assign State Department agents for Foreign Service, which means he placed spies. And like that just like gets ridiculous. That I don't know if NICAP didn't know it, didn't care what that meant, that, didn't understand what the State Department does. Even if they didn't understand it, it just gets crazy that this, in my opinion, was so out in the open. Like this really isn't even that secret, to, as Jeff aptly noted earlier, researchers that are interested in the sociological aspects of it, instead of the only thing we read is Richard Hall's report on 750 UFO sightings,
Yeah, like this, I think this is what made me think of what I was observing earlier on about just being kind of transparent, because it doesn't matter since the people that will see it will misunderstand the context, basically. or miss, what might be significant from a particular perspective.
Yeah, yeah, including me. That like if I'm coming at it from UFOs and I go, oh wow, here it is. Like we were saying a few minutes ago, here's Walter Bedell Smith saying we want to use this for psychological operations. And we like see here's the CIA and NICAP, or at least their assets. Like at best, the CIA assets just happen to be interested in UFOs and help NICAP launch, like at best. And while I might look at that as, wow, that's interesting about UFOs, they may have not cared. Like we don't care if you associate the CIA with UFOs. We've obviously got a former director sitting on the board. This was about transferring covert funds and sponsoring coups around the world. That's what we didn't want people to figure out. It does kind of seem like something like that, doesn't it? Like we were never hiding that there was government involved, even though they were adamantly telling Mr. Serling, no government guys around here. And it's like all they were, Thanks for joining us, Erica. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Take care. And
Bye,
I just want to
Erica.
say, Sharon and Allison, it's really cool to actually talk with you and to see your faces, and I look forward to having more conversations. And bye, you guys. Have a wonderful evening.
You too.
Take care. Bye, Randy. Bye, Jeff. Bye, Jack. Thank you.
Bye.
Any comments, closing thoughts?
Well, another thing that I wanted to just observe was that the thing about the leaderless resistance that Amos wrote. It kind of, I don't know, it kind of makes me think of NICAP from that perspective of as a psychological operation kind of function. Like it could be playing various different functions simultaneously, and one of them could definitely be, to kind of artificially create sort of grassroots, you know, um, uh, movement kind of thing, like like that's guided by a certain particular type of ideology related to UFOs.
Yeah, yeah. Any thoughts, Randy?
Just wanted to say very impressive research.
Oh, thank you. I kind of got lucky with some of it. Like one of Amos's files was just named King. So it's like, huh. There is at Princeton University up in New Jersey, there are some 500 letters in a collection they have of a Colonel Joseph Bryan collection that I don't know if any UFO researchers have ever gone up there and read. And I don't know if any have ever read that would have known to be looking for names like Mary Von King and stuff like that, I don't know, but thank you, Randy. How about you, Allison?
I second what Randy said. Yeah, amazing research, and you tying it all together is fascinating.
That's very gracious of you. Thank you. That's generous. And it's still really not like there is no CIA document that says here was our psychological operation. It's just a bunch of people knew each other and You can surmise that counsel services was an asset if they were working for the ECA, that was an asset of the CIA, but you can't prove that, you know. It's just because, yeah, like, I mean, it, in my opinion, as I said, it does defy logic to think that people that were in the lines of work they would have just decided that they were just interested in hanging out at I'm being a little over the top here, but hanging out with Clara John at her farm. But you get the gist of what I'm saying. Yeah.
Was there an aha moment that you had with figuring this out, or was it just kind of gradually?
The ECA letter was pretty big, you know, when I got that, and combined with I looked for it harder when I found that that it wasn't just rumors, that, yeah, Amos does know. And even though he's going to come up with UFOs pretty soon, but he wasn't really involved with NICAP. But it did show that the PR firm was representing spooks. So what are they doing, you know, with Brown and NICAP, I wondered. And then I looked harder after finding those letters from Ron Grogan to Mary King during that time, that, you know, that it's right on the right timeline. And so if there was an aha moment, it was going to newspapers.com after having that CIA letter and going, wow, it's right here. ECA is using Mary Von King as a spokesperson for counsel services, saying they're conducting international aid and education, when here's Hillencoter's letter that he wants to use ECA to collect and report top secret financial information. And obviously he'd know then, like, who the people are even that are incorporating NICAP, while he's never mentioning this to Kehoe, apparently. And you wouldn't, because why would you? You know, you're like read into classified projects with people and you see them around town. And if you're introduced at church, I guess you just pretend you've never met and shake hands and act like you just met. But it got to me to the point that it defied reasonable explanation that these people weren't conducting some kind of operation. Any thoughts, Jeff?
I was just curious, like, what do we know about Mary Von King's, like, actual background, like, before any of this? Like, how did she end up in this position where she was, you know, running counsel services? Like, I found, you know, basically one thing in, like, the newspapers about, I guess, her husband dying in 1974. And she comes up in JFK stuff because of Amos again and his connection with Clendon and Ryan, and how apparently Amos was looking for a guy to smuggle Stalin's son out of Russia. And so he contacted King, who then, you know, put him in touch with Ryan, who would put up the money or whatever. But do we know anything about her life pre any of this stuff?
I was talking a little with Rachel about that before we started recording tonight, that I came across one article, I think in newspapers.com, that described her as a lighting expert and that she sold lighting, and she was an actress in community theater. And I thought, wow, that's just perfect. You know, she's an actress. And other than that, no, I found very little information on her. And she's another one that I kind of wondered how many names there are, how many she may have used.
That seems like quite the leap from actress in lighting to basically running what looks like a CIA front organization.
Yeah, I think because she's an actress was my thinking that was part of it. Or I don't know what her husband really did. I found little on him or how many husbands there may have been. I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, you're right, especially during that era. Okay, 3 people go into business together to run a PR firm. And women often didn't even work outside the home unless it was like during wartime or something. Yeah, it's certainly a valid question. Where like McCormick, I could find a lot on him. I could find FBI files. I could find the security they ran on him. I could find he tried to be a politician. He was a well-known insurance agent. He worked for a lot of government agencies, including, this one's crazy too. This is another one that just puts it over the top. One of the guys that McCormick that helped open Counsel Services went to work for the ECA. So that was pretty over the top too. But maybe, I don't know, maybe she was a secretary of his somewhere along the line and was trusted. I don't know. They kept it pretty well hidden, didn't they? I will say this too. I think CIA was among the first United States agencies that started fully exploiting the potential of females in intelligence gathering and collecting and exploitation, where it's my opinion, historians that are better educated than I on it may disagree, but it's my opinion FBI was like behind on that and often like would write a report about what the men were doing and they would just like note the wife's name or something, but they like wouldn't hardly even run background checks like through the 40s and the early 50s, where I think CIA was really on top of nobody's paying attention to what the female is doing, and let's take advantage of that, I think. More so than some of the other agencies, is my interpretation. Thanks, everybody. Good night, Allison. Any closing thoughts?
Whoever said they wanted more about Mary Vaughn, no, I'm the same way with Thomas O'Keefe. Don't know why. Like, where do these people come from?
I will email his a link to O'Keefe's info just so you can see it. And thanks for watching. Any closing thoughts, anyone? All right. Thank you for being here with us. We appreciate you. Check us out at expandingfrontiersresearch.org. You can find out more on our Patreon as well as our YouTube channel. And you can be part of the discussion group as well. We would enjoy more thoughts and more good intellectual stimulation. And thank you all. I really appreciate you. And we will see you next time.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank
you.
Thanks, everybody. It's nice to see you.